The wind cut like razors across the Arctic flatland of northern Alaska as Sergeant Gabriel Cross pressed deeper into the white silence, his breath fogging the inside of his helmet visor. The convoy had stopped moving 6 hours ago. Radio contact had gone dead. The last message from Outpost Kilo 7 was chilling. Asterisk, they're not responding. Something's in the ground. We're sealing the hatch. Asterisk after that. Nothing, just static. Now, Cross and his recon team were tasked with finding out why 17 soldiers, 3 drones, and 2 contractors had vanished without a trace. Cross adjusted the strap on his M4 and signaled for Corporal Valdez to check the rear. No tracks behind them, just wind-blown snow erasing the world second by second. Each man wore thermal gear layered with ballistic plates, their faces nearly invisible under frosted visors and breath-muffled masks. Even with all the high-tech equipment, drones, encrypted headsets, and thermal sensors, they felt completely blind out here. The Arctic wasn't hostile in the usual way. It didn't scream at you. It swallowed you quietly with patience. Gabriel hated this kind of silence. It reminded him of Afghanistan, of the time his unit entered that abandoned schoolhouse in Ghazni province, and only 3 men came out. Not because of gunfire, because of something else. Something that couldn't be explained in after-action reports. They crested a ridge and saw it. Outpost Kilo 7, or what was left of it. The perimeter fence was half buried in snow. The southern gate was wide open, torn, not broken down, but bent outward, as if something inside had wanted out. Cross lowered his binoculars slowly, pulse rising. A column of frozen smoke still hung above the mess hall's collapsed roof. A generator thrummed softly in the distance. Power was still running, at least partially. But there were no guards, no movement, no welcome. They advanced carefully, rifles up, boots crunching in tight formation. The first body was found near the comms tower. He was face down, half buried in ice. No visible wounds. His weapon was still slung over his shoulder. Cross knelt beside him and pulled back the man's collar. His face was frozen in a silent scream, eyes wide open, pupils blown, like he'd seen something just before his heart stopped. Gabriel muttered a prayer. "Cross," Valdez called out. "Got a weird thermal hit in the chapel building, just one." Gabriel turned slowly. The chapel? Every outpost had one, even if it was barely used. A place for quiet, meant for soldiers to feel human in an inhuman environment. This one sat squat and dark near the far end of the base. Half its steeple was gone. The front door flapped open the wind, like an unhinged jaw. He raised his voice. "Keep your eyes up. If there's anything alive in there, we'll find out fast." Inside the chapel, they found a second body. A communications officer named Daniels. He sat upright in the third pew, a tablet still glowing weakly in his lap. His neck was broken. No sign of struggle, just clean and precise. The air inside the chapel was wrong, colder than outside. They could see their breath as if standing in a freezer. Valdez scanned with thermal. "There's something under the floor," he whispered. "Moving." Cross didn't hesitate. "We open it." They pried up a section of rotten floorboards. Beneath was a trapdoor they hadn't seen on the original base schematics. The metal was old, rusted and covered in frost. Not military issue. Not new. It looked ancient. Corporal Reynolds, the team's engineer, checked the hinges. This wasn't put here by command. This thing predates the outpost. The trapdoor groaned open. A wave of unnatural cold rolled up from the black void below. Their helmet lights flickered. The HUDs in their visors glitched for a second. Just static. Cross steadied his breath. Below was a spiral stairwell made of stone. Not concrete. Not steel. Stone. "Jesus," muttered Reynolds. "What the hell is this?" "Only one way to find out," Cross said, stepping down into the dark. They moved in silence, flashlights darting across walls etched with symbols none of them could identify. Valdez recorded everything with his body cam. The passage bent sharply to the left, then right, like a labyrinth. They saw old bones, animal, maybe human, scorch marks on the walls. And then footprints, bare, human-shaped, but far too large. Valdez whispered, "Sergeant, why are there prints going up the stairs?" Gabriel stopped walking. That was when they heard it, a soft knock. Then another, from above, back where they'd come from. Reynolds swung his rifle up. "Something's closing the hatch." Cross ran up 3 steps and screamed into comms. "K9, confirm open hatch, confirm." But there was only static. The door slammed shut above them with a deafening echo. The lights flickered out, one by one. Then the whispering started. Valdez activated emergency IR mode. Cross saw him stumble backward, then scream. A pale, thin hand had gripped his shoulder, coming from inside the wall itself. Gabriel fired upward, rounds ricocheting off ancient stone. But whatever was there was gone. Reynolds was shaking. "What the hell is this place?" Gabriel didn't answer. He couldn't. All he could think about was the last message from the missing unit. Asterisk, they're not responding. Something's in the ground. We're sealing the hatch. Asterisk. They weren't crazy. They were trying to protect the world above. Gabriel turned slowly. We go deeper. We find another way out. Reynolds grabbed his shoulder. "Are you nuts? We should wait, call extraction, sit tight." Gabriel looked back at him, calm and cold. "If we sit, we die." As they continued downward, they passed a rusted military sign, one barely legible under grime and age. But Gabriel paused and wiped it clean. It read, Level 3, Project Seraphim, Decommissioned 1974. Beneath that, authorized personnel only. The hair on his neck stood up. He turned to Valdez and whispered, "Now tell me again why this place wasn't on the blueprints." Valdez looked pale, because someone erased it. The silence pressing again, colder this time, hungrier. But Gabriel pressed forward into the dark, heart pounding, rifle steady, mind calculating. Because one thing was now certain. The men hadn't vanished. They'd been taken. And whatever took them was still down here. Reynolds trailed behind as they descended deeper, sweat forming beneath layers of Arctic armor despite the unrelenting cold. The air had changed, thicker, older, somehow metallic. The stairwell walls closed in, every turn tighter, as if the ground was reluctant to let them pass. Cross led the way, his rifle sweeping with precision. Valdez brought up the rear, constantly scanning for movement, though all he saw on his visor was static interference. Communication with the surface had gone completely dark. Even the signal booster they planted at the hatch refused a ping. They hit a level platform, the stairs finally ending in a corridor flanked by steel doors, some ajar, others sealed shut with yellowed hazard tape. The corridor lighting was dim and inconsistent, flickering with the same pulse as a heartbeat. Graffiti, no, warnings, lined the walls, written in multiple languages, some Cyrillic, some Arabic, some in a jagged scrawl that didn't match any alphabet Cross recognized. There was one phrase that kept recurring, asterisk, do not awaken a hollow. Asterisk, Valdez whispered over comms. This doesn't look like old Cold War stuff. Some of this tech is modern, newer than our own loadouts. Cross nodded without turning. Someone's been here recently, or never left. He stopped in front of the first open door and slowly pushed it wider. Inside was a small room filled with rusted cots, metal lockers, and a central table piled with files and worn notebooks. On the walls, maps, photos, and a bulletin board filled with red threads linking names, dates, and events going back to the early 1950s. Reynolds moved toward the table, careful not to disturb anything, eyes scanning the notebooks. Project Seraphim, he read aloud, flipping pages. Subject containment, biogenic fusion, temporal bleed risk, all blacked out past 1974. These notes are post 9/11. This place was reopened. That means... He froze, his eyes catching on a blurry photograph tucked under one page. It showed 7 figures in hazmat suits standing around a sarcophagus-like chamber. Inside it, a humanoid form, impossibly tall, unnaturally thin, lay curled in a fetal position. The head was wrong, elongated, eyes where there shouldn't have been any. Valdez stepped back from the image. I've seen something like this before. Classified briefings, fringe programs. Stuff you never talk about out loud. Gabriel snatched the photo and held it close. Someone dug up something that wasn't meant to be found, and they brought it here. Reynolds checked a monitor in the corner. Though dead for decades, it flickered once when he tapped it. A single frame loaded on screen, grainy surveillance footage from less than a week ago, for soldiers descending the very stairwell they had just used. The timestamp was 5 days prior. They were alive, but the footage cut out before showing them return. Cross exhaled slowly. If they made it down here, maybe they left a trail. They pushed forward. The next few rooms were tighter, more deliberately constructed. Biolabs, analysis bays, even a decontamination unit, all abandoned in a hurry. Tools strewn across countertops. Test tubes shattered. Doors left half open, like someone had run out mid-procedure. A line of fluorescent lights buzzed overhead, but every third one flickered in strobe bursts. The sound grated nerves already stretched thin. Reynolds paused beside a locked door marked Level 4, Restricted Tier Alpha. He tapped his wrist console, attempting to breach the lock. The panel lit up. Military encryption. Modern. This wasn't mothballed in the 70s. This is next-gen security. Gabriel leaned closer, eyes narrowed. So, why didn't we know it existed? Valdez chimed in from the end of the hallway. Found something. They followed him into a narrow dormitory. The beds were slept in recently. Half-eaten rations sat on a folding table. A laptop still blinked faintly, humming with residual power. Valdez flipped it open. It was password-locked, but beneath it sat a handwritten log. He read aloud, Day 6 for men missing. No breach alarms triggered. No signs of exit. Day 8. Whispers now audible through ventilation. Requesting evac. Denied. Day 9. Crow appeared in the chapel. Thought he was dead. He brought something back with him. Gabriel froze. Crow. Valdez flipped to the final entry. Day 10. Sealing lower levels. Subject Delta is active. God help us. If anyone finds this, don't follow the voices. Cross leaned against the frame, trying to slow his pulse. They encountered something alive, intelligent, possibly aware of their movement. Then why didn't they report it? Reynolds asked. Maybe they tried, Gabriel muttered, and someone shut them down. The lights blinked out for 2 full seconds. When they came back, Valdez was gone. Reynolds spun. Valdez? Valdez! Gabriel raised his weapon, scanning. He was just here. Where the hell? Then the scream came, muffled, distant, not from the hallway, but from inside the ventilation ducts. Reynolds swore and took 2 steps forward before Gabriel blocked him. No, we stick to protocol. Reynolds shoved past. That was Valdez. We can't just leave him. Cross grabbed his arm. You run blind in here and you'll be next. That's exactly what it wants. Reynolds stared at him, breath ragged. You think this is a trap? Gabriel's voice was low and deliberate. This whole place is a trap. They backed into a secure room and sealed the door. Inside were old monitoring consoles, each one linked to internal surveillance feeds, most of them now static, but one showed movement. A figure pacing the lower lab level, barely visible, blurred, distorted. Not Valdez. Reynolds pointed. What is that? Gabriel watched closely. The figure stopped, turned slowly, faced the camera. No eyes, no mouth, just smooth skin, stretched over bone. Then it lifted one hand and tapped the lens. The feed cut to black. Gabriel stepped back, his breathing shallow. Whatever that thing is, he said quietly, it knows we're here. Outside the room, something scratched at the walls. Reynolds whispered, What do we do? Gabriel stared at the remaining maps on the table. One showed an alternate exit route, buried through 2 more levels. We move, he said. We find Valdez if we can. But we finish the mission. Reynolds hesitated, then nodded. As they prepared to leave, Gabriel took one last look at the surveillance screen, hoping for a sign. And he signed that Valdez was still alive, but the screen stayed black. and the scratching got louder. The door hissed as it slid open, not with the grind of rusted hinges, but the smooth precision of something far more modern, far newer than anything they'd seen in the tunnel so far. A blast of warm, sterile air struck Sergeant Gabriel Cross and Silas Crow as they stepped cautiously into the chamber beyond. The corridor behind them was ancient and crumbling, but this space was pristine. Sleek metal walls, embedded LED panels casting a cold blue glow, and panels inscribed with military insignia decades out of use. "Project Seraphim," Silas whispered, his voice laced with dread and recognition. Cross glanced back at him, searching his face. "You knew about this?" "Rumors," Silas admitted. "Old chatter. Some said it was just a Cold War myth. Others believe it was a DARPA initiative shut down in the 70s. What it really was, no one ever agreed. Until now." Rows of black data terminals lined the walls, humming faintly with residual power. Monitors flickered with static and half-loaded diagnostics, though most were unreadable. In the center of the room, a reinforced window revealed a sealed observation chamber. Inside it, dimly lit by flickering red emergency lights, lay a cylindrical structure, organic in shape, covered in interlocking tendrils that pulsed faintly, like a breathing creature. Gabriel's fingers tightened on his rifle. What the hell were they doing down here? Before Silas could respond, the lights dimmed again. A voice, metallic, female, and half-corrupted, played through the overhead speaker. "Warning. Containment breach. Primary lockdown override disabled. Biological hazard protocol engaged. Level 3 compromised. Repeat." Then static. They moved quickly, checking doorways, clearing angles, keeping low. Behind one sealed door marked medical, they found more remnants of the lost unit. Notes pinned to walls with shaking handwriting, oxygen tanks knocked over, and a blood trail leading under a shattered reinforced window. A shattered gurney lay in the middle of the floor, restraints torn from their anchors. What were they trying to restrain? Cross asked aloud, scanning for movement. Silas picked up a tablet. It was cracked but functional. The last video file loaded after a few seconds of buffering. The screen showed a team of soldiers, modern gear, Kilo 7 insignias, standing around the same observation chamber they had just seen. A woman in a lab coat, mid-50s, addressed the camera. "Day 193. Subject Delta is still alive, still evolving. Neural patterns suggest adaptive mimicry. She hesitated. It's begun mimicking speech. Not random phrases. Complete sentences. It quoted my husband. He's been dead 15 years. The feed cut to black. Silas looked up slowly, his voice quiet. "This isn't ancient. This is recent. Ongoing." Cross shook his head. "No, this is containment, not research anymore. They weren't trying to understand it. They were trying to bury it." The corridor trembled suddenly, a low groan echoing through the structure. Dust fell from the ceiling. Gabriel steadied himself. Then came a louder sound, metal wrenching against metal, from somewhere deeper in the complex. Valdez's voice crackled through Cross's calm. "Sarge, Reynolds is gone. Just gone. 1 minute he's beside me. Next he's not even on the motion tracker. Something's down here. We're falling back to entry point Echo." "Repeat, Echo." Cross pressed the earpiece tighter. "No. Hold your position. We're not splitting up again. Stay sharp. I'm coming back for you." He turned to Silas, who was already nodding. They moved at a run, retracing steps through the winding corridors, but the base had changed. Doors that were open were now sealed. Hallways looped strangely. "We're not in a fixed structure anymore," Silas muttered. "It's shifting, just like the old reports. The space bends around the subject." Cross didn't slow. "Then we find the center and end it before it spreads." They reached what used to be the medical lab, now collapsed. Flames danced from a ruptured power conduit. A shadow passed in the smoke ahead, quick, wrong in shape. Not running, not walking, but gliding silently. Cross flicked to infrared. The figure wasn't warm. It wasn't cold either. It just wasn't. He opened fire. The bullets impacted, tore through it, but it didn't slow. Instead, it dissipated like smoke and wind. Behind him, Silas shouted, "It's not one thing, it's many. It mimics, replicates, breaks form." They fell back toward a reinforced elevator shaft. The command center was at the bottom. If answers existed, they'd be there. As they descended, the lights flickered again, and Cross looked at Silas. Why are you down here?" Silas hesitated, then answered, "My brother was stationed at the original Kilo 7 site in 74. He never came home. I've spent the last 30 years digging through black files, tracing whispers. I thought it was buried in snow, but they rebuilt it, and now it's awake again." The elevator doors opened with a hiss. They stepped into the command chamber. Screens surrounded them. Most were offline, but one played a looping video feed from a helmet cam, Reynolds's, judging by the timestamp. He walked through the same hallway they had. A whisper on the feed made Silas lean closer. "Gabriel." Cross stiffened. That was his name. The voice repeated, softer now. "Gabriel, help us." Then static. The chamber trembled again. Walls buckled. A ceiling panel fell. Alarm screamed. The observation cylinder cracked. Tendrils burst through, black as tar, writhing like antennae of some long-buried insect. Silas grabbed Cross's shoulder. "We destroy it. Now." Cross spotted the emergency purge console. Keycard access. No time. He ripped the panel open, began hot-wiring the trigger system. Sparks flew. Silas raised his weapon, covering the door as shapes moved behind the glass. Dozens of them, forming from shadow, whispering, some wearing the faces of lost men. Cross's hands bled over wires. Then connection. The console flared red. Purge sequence armed. Detonation in T-minus 90 seconds. They ran, sprinting through flickering corridors. Sirens wailing. Valdez's voice cut in again. "Sarge, where the hell are you? We're coming to you. Get to the surface." But just before the corridor ended, something blocked their path. One of the figures. It had no eyes, no face, but it wore Cross's uniform. It whispered, "You left me." Cross didn't hesitate. One round. Center mass. The shape fell apart like ash. They reached the extraction stairwell, oxygen masks on, fire at their heels. Bursting into the cold night, they found Valdez waiting, rifle up, face pale. Cross grabbed his vest, pulled him into the snow as the explosion ripped through the base below. A column of flame, and ice shot upward. The ground quaked. They lay there for a long time, catching breath, watching the base collapse into itself. Cross finally stood, helmet in hand, face smeared with soot and frost. Silas sat beside him, watching the sky, where the stars seemed suddenly brighter. Neither spoke, because they knew it wasn't over. It had just retreated. And someday it would call out again, and someone would answer. The emergency light strobed red across the corridor, pulsing like a wounded heartbeat. Gabriel presses back against the cold wall, rifle trained toward the dark intersection, where the scratching had stopped. For 15 minutes, neither he nor Reynolds had moved. The creature, whatever it was, had gone quiet again. That silence was worse than noise. It meant thinking, waiting, hunting. Gabriel's mind raced, trying to reconstruct the layout from the fragmented maps they had seen. 2 more levels. One escape route. One missing teammate. A hostile entity moving through the compound with intelligence and purpose. They had trained for insurgents, for biological threats, even for psychological warfare. But not for this. Not for something that watched them through steel walls and vent shafts as if the entire facility was its own twisted body. Reynolds spoke softly. "We're gonna die down here." Gabriel didn't respond at first. He adjusted the dial on his rifle scope instead, switching to night vision. The walls ahead dissolved into a dull green blur. Still no movement. But that didn't mean safety. "You remember what they said during SEER training?" Gabriel finally whispered. "About panic?" "Yeah. Breathe. Think. Survive." Gabriel nodded. "Do that." They moved in short bursts, clearing rooms as they went. 2-man sweeps, doors flung open fast, barrels up. Nothing. Only more signs of abandonment. Broken test equipment. Freezers left ajar with frost curling out like gasps of breath. And always faint traces. Recently disturbed dust. Scuff marks on the floor. Wiring torn from walls as if something had crawled through it. They entered a control center halfway through level 4. Dozens of monitors lined the walls. Some cracked. Some blinking with residual power. Reynolds went to work quickly. Fingers dancing across the touchscreen interface. Backup system still alive, he muttered. We've got files. Audio logs. Camera feeds. Wait. One feed was still functional. Camera 22. Basement quarantine wing. It was Valdez. He stood motionless in the center of the corridor, facing a sealed vault door. His posture was stiff, arms hanging limp. The lights flickered overhead. A shadow moved behind him, fast and formless. Gabriel leaned closer to the screen. That's not how Valdez stands, he said. Reynolds narrowed his eyes. What are you saying? I'm saying that might not be him. The feed distorted suddenly. A high-pitched whine flooded the room, loud enough to make them both wince. The screen cracked down the center, and the power to the entire console failed. The room went black again. Gabriel switched to his backup light and aimed it at the door. We go now. That vault might be the exit. Reynolds hesitated. Or it might be where that thing's been nesting. Gabriel loaded a fresh magazine and chambered around. We're out of guesses. They descended the last set of stairs slowly. The architecture changed. No more steel walls or military insulation, just raw rock, like the base had been carved into the bones of the earth. The air was thick, heavy with moisture. Faint whispers echoed from nowhere and everywhere at once. Gabriel couldn't understand the words. They weren't in any language he knew. They sounded ancient, wrong. The corridor opened into a massive chamber. Its ceiling arched above them like a cathedral. In the center stood the vault door from feed. Thick, reinforced, embedded into the rock itself. Valdez stood in front of it, unmoving. Gabriel raised his weapon. Valdez. No response. He stepped forward cautiously. Say something. Prove you're alive. Valdez turned. His face was pale, eyes fully dilated. Blood trailed from his nose, ears, and the corners of his mouth. But he smiled. You came, he said. Reynolds whispered. He's not right. Gabriel didn't lower his weapon. What happened? Valdez cocked his head. It showed me everything. Time. Death. The truth of what we are. What did you open? Gabriel asked. Valdez didn't answer. He only turned back to the door and placed both palms against it. Symbols flared beneath his hands. Symbols that hadn't been their secons before. Stop him, Reynolds hissed. Gabriel fired. The shot hit Valdez in the shoulder, spinning him away from the vault. He collapsed against a stone, twitching, laughing through blood. You think bullets matter now, he wheezed. The vault door began to shift, groaning with seismic weight. Reynolds ran to controls mounted beside it, trying desperately to override the lock. This is pre-programmed. It's been counting down since we entered the base. We're just triggers. Gabriel dragged Valdez back from the interface. Tell me how to stop it. Valdez shook his head slowly. It's already awake. The door opened. A wave of cold rolled out that sucked the air from Gabriel's lungs. Beyond the threshold was a chamber of complete blackness. Not shadow, not void, something else, something alive. Within that darkness, figures moved, some tall, some small, all wrong. Reynolds screamed, close it now. Gabriel shoved Valdez back toward the steps and grabbed the manual override lever. He pulled with everything he had. Sparks burst from the panel. Metal ground against metal. The door began to groan shut, but not fast enough. One of the things inside stepped into view. It looked like a man, until it didn't. Limbs too long. Head tilted like an animal. Eyes like mirrors reflecting things Gabriel didn't want to see. It moved fast. So fast, he almost didn't fire in time. But he did. Round slammed into its chest, slowing it but not stopping it. Reynolds threw the emergency release, and the door slammed shut with a final, echoing boom. The lights cut out. Total silence returned. Then Valdez's laughter filled the dark. "You close the door," he rasped, "but it's already in you." Gabriel turned and struck him hard, knocking him unconscious. He and Reynolds dragged him back up the stairs in silence. Every step was agony. Every corridor screamed threat, but nothing else attacked. They reached the main level hours later. The hatch they'd entered through was still shut, but now blinking with a green light. Extraction beacon. Gabriel activated his flare and fired it through the cracked airlock. The team arrived 20 minutes later, heavily armed, confused, and concerned. Protocol kicked in. Quarantine. Decontamination. Immediate psychological evaluation. Gabriel gave his report. Reynolds corroborated. Valdez never woke up. 3 days later, the official record read, Outpost Kilo 7, classified containment breach. Survivors recovered. Facility sealed permanently. But Gabriel knew the truth. They hadn't sealed it. They just locked it away until it wanted out again. He sat alone on his bunk the night before debrief, staring at the faded photograph he'd taken from the chamber, a face in a hazmat suit, eyes wide with wonder. Crow. He whispered the name like a curse. Then he turned off the lights, pulled the blanket over his shoulders, and tried to ignore the faint, persistent scratching coming from inside the ventilation shaft. It was still in him, just like Valdez said.